and then the other one went. So yeah,
Fab. Okay, well, we've hit 12 o'clock. Recording's just started. And I think there's
gonna
going to
let
be people
people in.
popping into the room now. So just as people are entering the room, I'll just give you a chance to get in and get settled. Dan and I are just setting up here. So we will start the session in about 10 seconds or so. Okay. Hello and welcome to the next instalment in the BTS Career Pathways podcast series. My name is Alex Langhorne and I head up the business support team here at BTS. So this is now the 8th career podcast that we've done as part of the series, and they've been really popular. So I'm hoping this one will continue, and I know it will. In this episode, we are looking to explore some of the different challenges and successes experienced by people who are entering the financial planning profession. And the specific topic we're looking at today is quite exciting. Over the next 40 minutes, we're going to be discussing the marvelous world of social media and how you can use it to grow your professional brand. So if you're listening, you may already be a seasoned expert in social media, you may be using it regularly, or you might just be thinking about, what is this all about? Is it something I can use? And how do I do it? So helping me out today, because I too am a relative novice on social media. I enjoy it, I use it, but I'm certainly not an expert. But I have got joining me today, the fabulous Dan Graham. And I know that many of our listeners already are familiar with Dan. He is the head of community experience at NextGen Planners, along with a couple of other roles, which I'm sure Dan will tell us about himself shortly. And he describes himself, and I love this mission statement, Dan. You're on a mission to transform financial planning into an innovative, dynamic, and diverse profession and bring financial services into the 21st century. Wow.
Yeah, big mission.
That is a big mission, isn't it? So I'm really grateful for you agreeing to join the session today, Dan. I'm personally really excited to chat with you because I know for sure that I'm going to learn quite a bit in the next 40 minutes. But in all seriousness, your posts do feature regularly in my newsfeed. You host podcasts, you post videos, you're constantly putting out new, exciting, relevant content to the financial planning community. So for anyone that hasn't seen your profile online, where have you been? But for anybody who hasn't, can you tell us a bit more about the work that you do and the sorts of stuff that you do online?
Yeah, so welcome everyone. Thank you very much for listening or watching or whatever it is. So yeah, I mean, we are I was working in a financial planning firm, qualified, everything like that, and then found that the passion was actually not in doing the financial planning. It was growing a community of financial planners. So that's where NextGen Planners comes in. So I've been there now for about 4 years. And it's my role basically to run the community, make sure everyone's enjoying themselves, but also on the social media side is to keep that relevance going. So that's probably why you see a lot from us. We tend to post, I mean, just because we've got the time, by the way, I'm not saying everyone should be able or should have to do this. We post about 3 or 4 times a day. Now, that is a lot, and that's very, very frequent, and I'm aware of that. But that's simply just because we have so much to talk about and so much to do and a big mission as well. So we have to do that. On the Doc Vinci side, which I don't know if people in your audience might know about Doc Vinci. If not, this is a good time to tell them about it. I was getting very, very annoyed at the stuff that financial planners were giving to their clients through no fault of their own. But, when we think of terms of business, when we think of client agreements, when we think of privacy policies, all that kind of stuff, it's, very, very, very dull. It looks like it's just being pulled out of a file cabinet and it doesn't have any inspiration in there. But this is often the first touch point that a client has with you and your brand. And if they think it's boring, why would they think they're going to get anything else other than boring from you? So we don't put a lot of thought into this kind of stuff, but I think it does deserve a lot of stuff. So that goes from everything right through from terms of business, client agreements, through the actual presentation of financial plans. And recently I've been working on websites and kind of marketing strategy with people as well, which is where the social media stuff comes into it. But anything to do with this kind of stuff, I am always excited to have a conversation about. So when you asked me to do this, I was like, yes, I want to do this desperately.
Oh, fantastic. And we're so grateful to have this as part of the podcast series, because I know we've got lots of really keen people in the sort of BTS community who would like to do this. And we do engage quite a lot on social media as well. There's loads we could learn too from this session. And so I know we've got quite a few of our new financial planners in the BTS community who are keen to change the face of financial planning and to engage with clients in a different way. So this is not just about engaging with other financial planners and getting your first role, although that's a big part of the use of social media. It's also about how you engage with your clients and grow your client book, isn't it? Yeah. So I know there's lots of people interested in the topic. So some people love it, some people hate it, but I think it goes without saying that social media is one of the best places to promote a professional brand at the moment. So the aim of today really is to share some strategies that people can go away and implement from today. So starting from really basic stuff and then going through to some more ideas, some innovative things that you could be doing to use social media to grow your presence. But I think the first thing that we sort of need to cover off for anybody that might be thinking, gosh, what on earth is this all about? What is a professional brand? What does that mean? And why is it worth thinking about building one? Can you help me out, Dan? What do we mean, particularly in social media context? What's a professional brand?
Yeah, so when people think of brand, I think a lot of people think of like colors and logos and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, that's part of a brand, but a brand actually is way more than that. It's the way that you talk, it's the kind of message that you have. And I always kind of think of it as the space that is left by others. So what I mean by that is if your brand doesn't look completely different to what someone else is doing 5 minutes down the road from you, as in they're doing exactly the same thing as you, but you look exactly the same as them, why would your target audience think of you as any different to them? So branding is not only the colors and logos and everything like that, but it's also the way that you stand out from other people. Now, you can stand out from other people in terms of the things that you say. So I don't think anyone would disagree with me that I'm not really afraid to say when I don't like something or when I'm not impressed by something. And that, makes you stand out because you go against the grain. But it's also, I think it's a community. So, you guys, for instance, at BTS, you're growing a community around one certain topic, which is obviously passing exams and becoming the best financial planner that you can be. And that is a brand, creating a community of people around something that everyone has something in common with that makes you stand out from someone else who is doing another thing. And I think, to be honest, I think everyone has a professional brand. I just don't think they perhaps know it. And I don't think that everyone is using theirs just yet. So that is a kind of my interpretation of what I would call a professional brand. It's probably different to what some other people would call it, but that's generally how I come across this kind of stuff. Is I think the biggest thing is the space that is left by everyone else.
And how to occupy that. Yeah. And it has to be noticed that you're occupying that. So a lot of it is about defining yourself, isn't it? Defining what space you occupy. Now, I'm hearing a lot of things in there that sort of cross over between the personal and the professional, because sometimes what makes somebody unique or a service provider unique is the people and the personal side behind that. Because there are different ways you can offer financial planning services, absolutely, but what makes them drastically different is the personal side, the way in which things are done, rather than the what. That makes sense. So personal sometimes comes into it. So when we're talking about this professional branding, are we talking about personal branding for individuals as well? Is that relevant? Is that something we should be including in this?
So that is how I would think of it, is personal branding. But so professional branding, I would probably call corporate branding or business branding, for instance. And that's what we think of. So for instance, NextGen Planners has its own LinkedIn account, but then I've also got mine. Now we're very, very much aligned in the things that we like. Our values, like my values and NextGen Planners values, are pretty much directly aligned. Maybe a few things we differ on, but the majority of stuff we agree on. But that doesn't mean we can't talk about different stuff. So I would usually put the personal side down to things that you're interested in, your opinions, and personal accounts tend to get a lot more kind of engagement and a lot more conversation around the things that they're talking about. On the professional side or the kind of corporate side, as we say, so NextGen Planners, for instance, I would usually think that as somewhere where it's very kind of trustworthy and you're being there to show your presence. We do post a lot of content, obviously, but it's mainly to show people that we are there and to have brand awareness. So the lines get kind of blurred a lot of the time, to be honest. But I do think it's important to try and push for both. really. I think both of them are equally as important. They're just used for different things, really.
They are. So for any individuals listening, thinking about their own branding, so say they're coming towards the end of their qualification, they're looking at maybe securing that first role, or maybe they've got a role within a firm, and thinking, do I still continue to use my personal branding here now that I'm within a role? Would you say that's a good thing to do?
Absolutely, yeah, because so this is like a phrase that's thrown around a lot, which is thought leader, and it's becoming one of the biggest things in not only our profession but pretty much in the world at the moment, is that people will want a service from someone that they have heard from before or that they continuously engage with. So for instance, there's loads of people in financial planning who get a lot of their clients because they are seen as a thought leader in that space. So if we think of a certain niche, for instance, or specialism, if we think of like people who help people with divorce, if a financial planner is constantly talking about their clients going through divorce or something like that, there's no one else that they're going to go to other than that person. So yeah, absolutely. You've got to keep this personal brand stuff strong as well as working on the business brand. But I think definitely have your own personal account as well.
Yeah, and something I learned quite a little while ago, which sounds really basic, but when you create, say, your LinkedIn profile as an individual person, you can have more than one for yourself. Because at first I thought, okay, so I've got myself, and how do I put that within my organization? How do I use that to grow the organizational business when it's actually my personal profile? Because I joined LinkedIn many years ago when it was a bit of an online CV. So it was very much me. And I very quickly learned that you can have more than one for different organizations. So if you need to be on brand with, say, for me, for BTS, my LinkedIn profile is my BTS personal LinkedIn profile, but there's nothing to stop me having another one if I had another interest somewhere else or something more personal. So it's not a case that you have to have the one that's just you and you're exposing yourself to your professional community with everything that goes, all of your background. You can pick and choose what you share personally within a profile that fits your organization by having multiple personal profiles. And that's not inauthentic. That's about being relevant to the audience that you want to engage with.
Yeah.
So that was something.
Sorry, Alex, you touched on something very important there, which is the change in LinkedIn. So I think a lot of people, like, LinkedIn's a really active social media site. It's my favorite personally, just because of how active it is and there's kind of things that get talked about on there. I mean, that kind of might tell people how sad I am. But it has moved on from just being a CV. I don't see it as somewhere to communicate, to network with people who do the same thing as me. I see it as a complete marketing tool / somewhere to engage with others about great conversations. I don't see it as somewhere to promote like my past or to be recruited or anything like that now. I simply see it as somewhere to engage with people who are interested in what I'm saying, and also to potentially, leave an impact on financial planning as well. So I think it's a good point what you said. It definitely has moved on now from just that CV element.
It has. And I think other platforms have as well, which comes on to sort of the next question I've got really. There are so many different channels that you can use now. LinkedIn is one of my favorites as well, but you've got Instagram, you've got TikTok now, there's YouTube, there's Facebook, there's Twitter. Where do you start? If you're thinking, okay, I've bought into this idea, I want to start engaging with communities online. Which one do I start with? Do I do them all? Are there some I shouldn't touch? Is Facebook appropriate for business? All those sorts of things start to roll into your mind. So what are your thoughts on different channels and how they can be used?
God, I could literally talk for hours on this one. So I'm going to try and condense it as much as I can. Basically, I always tell people to try and focus on two if they can. So each of one of those has got a different audience on there and a different way that people use it. And I think that's what we need to remember, is the consumption of these different social media sites is different. Yeah. So when people go on TikTok, for instance, they usually distracting themselves from their day, and they're usually doing it either for fun or to find out about something that they're interested in. And if they find out something like educational along the way, then that's great. But they're not going on there usually. From my personal perspective, I'm never normally going on there usually to find something educational. If I was trying to find something educational, I'd go on LinkedIn or go on Twitter or something like that, or YouTube, for instance. And also the different types of audience that are on there. So although we would imagine that TikTok has a younger audience, it does. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be older audiences on there as well. Like, say, for instance, my parents have TikTok and they're approaching their 50s. You know, I think my grandma has TikTok and she's in her 20s. So like we shouldn't just write it off as being this kind of like, you know, we shouldn't put people into groups of where we think they're going to be. There are patterns, there absolutely are. But I always just say to people, start with 2. You know, there's no reason to limit it to 2, but 2 is pretty much the most you can concentrate on and give full focus to before you start spreading yourself too thin. Because if you spread yourself too thin, the quality just goes down. Even though the quantity might be the same, the quality just isn't as good, and you're not going to have as much impact on them. So if I was focusing on a younger audience, I would say Instagram, TikTok. If I was focusing on, you know, a perhaps middle-aged audience, I would still maybe use Instagram, but then use maybe Facebook and LinkedIn as well in there. So there's loads of different things that you can do out there. Each one's got its own individual audience. But again, I wouldn't pinhole everyone into those little groups if I could.
So none of them are inappropriate then for a financial planner to be using? No,
I think absolutely all of them are like needed, depending on which one you want to think with. I think the most important thing, which is hopefully what I get across today, is that, and I've been talking about this a lot recently, is that what we're trying to give people here is value and fun and engagement. I think I see a lot of people, again, through no fault of their own, because they haven't had any training on this kind of stuff. They're using it as like an advertising tool. And don't get me wrong, it can be a great place to advertise, and the odd advertisement for your financial planning firm or what you're doing or something is great. But that shouldn't be the only thing that you put out there, because if that is the only thing that you're going to put out there, people will literally just see you as an advertiser. What you need to be putting out there is value, something that stops people in their tracks and say, wow, I didn't know that. Thank you very much. I'm going to continue to follow you and engage with your content. They don't get anything new from seeing you advertise about something that you're offering at the moment. So the biggest thing I can say to people is remember that you're posting to people who are looking for something from what you're saying. You're not just posting to robots who can be advertised to all the time. So value, fun, and engagement is what we're going for on these things. Yeah, and that's really interesting, isn't it? Because it can be really tempting to use it as sort of free advertising, to pop out adverts for things that you want to sell, essentially. But that is not what LinkedIn or other social platforms are for necessarily anymore, are they? And you can get lost, I think, in the noise of adverts, because there are lots of organizations that do push the adverts out there, and occasionally they work. There's lots of sort of paid for ads on Facebook and things like that, but they do sometimes work, don't they? But we do post. I mean, we do advertisements for NextGen, but I mean, it's not all that we post. That's what I meant by that. So like I said, you can post advertisements every now and again, but if you just post advertisements, you can't expect anything in return, you know, because you're not giving anything to your audience. So why would they give anything back to you? So little advertisements sprinkled around is lovely and it's perfect. But if it's too much, then it's just you won't grow an audience or grow influence to do that. So that's not the goal, I guess. So if we've got somebody who's just starting out or thinking about using their existing profiles, we've talked about the importance of a professional brand and having one and what one is, but where do you start if you're trying to build yourself a professional brand? What sorts of things do you need to be thinking about first of all? So I think it's what I talked about earlier, which is the thing about finding your space or finding your gap. So your brand is, like I said, the space that no one else fills. So think about who you want to work with, and also what makes you you, and then just build on that. You know, think of all the things that your audience might be going through. Think about what they might find interesting, and then also think about what you can offer them. And I think, you know, once you started that there's a great book which I've got. Well, people will be able to see me pointing on them on the podcast, obviously, that's behind me, and it's called Building a Story Brand by a guy called Donald Miller. If anyone hasn't read it before, definitely give it a read. It's less than 200 pages. Great for people like me who have very short attention spans. But that book literally changed everything for me, because you realize that you are not the hero in your client's life. They are the hero. You are the guide. So all you're doing is you're just guiding them through life and making sure that they're fully equipped to be everything they want to be. So start with that space, start with that gap that is left by everyone else, figure out how you can fill that gap and what people are looking for. And then also remember that you're the the guide and not the hero. And I think Jordan's just put a comment in this thing there saying, can you confirm the name of that book? It's Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller.
Great. I'll put a link to that one in the podcast, because that's a really good recommendation, because there's so many books out there about these things. So it's nice to have a recommendation. So that's a good one. I like the fact it's a short read as well, because with lots going on.
With short attention spans, it is literally perfect. So you can finish that book in like 2 days if you really, really give it. I mean, it is so interesting, and it gives you actionable stuff as well to do. Like it's not just one where it gives you the ideas and then doesn't give you an idea how to put them into place. It actually, gives you the ideas and then a framework to use for how you can actually use them going forward as well. So it's really good.
Excellent. Okay. So starting to build your professional brand, you've got to identify that gap that you're wanting to fill. So some of that, I guess, comes from using social media yourself to begin with and seeing what other people are putting out there. I read somewhere recently that to become a content creator, you've got to be a content consumer first of all, which I thought was quite interesting, to actually start scrolling through social media in your breaks to see what sort of conversations are happening, which ones resonate with you, which ones don't. Are there gaps that you could start to talk about to engage with people? And could you complement things that are already happening? So I think being a user is a good starting point to help you identify what that gap might be. And then you've got to think about who you want to talk to, I suppose, as well, because there's so many different audiences out there and different tones and different ways you could engage. So when you think about engaging your target audience, you know who you want to be targeting. The first thing is think about who do you want to read your posts. Should you be targeting potential clients, potential contacts, people that you've got no relationship with first of all? Should you have an established relationship to start with? Is it okay to go in cold? How do you identify who you're talking to, and how do you get that engagement? That seems to be the sort of magic bullet, doesn't it? What do you do to achieve that?
So I just want to, before I answer that question, I want to come back to what you just said about consuming the content. So I absolutely agree. And that's important to be able to find that gap and find what other people aren't doing at the moment. But what you shouldn't do, I don't think, is look at other people and think, I want to be that. Because having a professional brand, like we said, is identifying how you're different to everyone else. And if you start to be led by what other people are doing, then you'll lose all the initiative inside yourself to want to be able to do something different to what they're doing. Now, you could see what other people are doing and think, oh my God, that is terrible. I want to create something that's completely different to that. And that's great. But if you start to see people as like somewhere that you want to be, then you lose all creativity. And there's I think what I'm trying to get across is there's a good balance between consuming content and seeing it as useful for you creating your own brand, but at the same time not wanting to be somebody else as well, because only you can be your own brand. On the question that you asked about target audience, this is so interesting because I think this is probably the most important question. Financial planning is such a weird profession or industry, whatever you want to call it. I call it profession, in that we're the only, one of the only professions that sees having a target audience as something to not have as your default. So what I mean by that is, when a lot of people qualify as financial planners, they want to help everyone and anyone, and they don't have what you would describe as a target audience. And then we get further down and we describe it as a niche or a specialism or something like that. In reality, it's just a target audience. Like we call it something else, but it is literally just a target audience. So I think a lot of financial planners that I see nowadays, they're realizing this, and they're starting with that target audience rather than just realizing it down the line. And that target audience can be a lot of things. So there's really specialized ones, like people who are going through divorce, or there's people who are doctors and stuff like that. And then there's kind of more broad ones like business owners who are coming up to retirement, for instance. But it is so crucial to know who you're talking to, because if you're talking to everyone, I always say that you're talking to no one, because you're not going to resonate with anyone if you're trying to answer everyone else's questions. So there's a really good, we did a session on this recently, a workshop for NextGen. And there's a really good lady in the States called Laura Latourette. And she only works with clients who are LGBTQ+. And the reason for that is because they have different needs to what other people have. On the surface, it might seem like they don't, but when you get deeper down, they actually do. And so she only works with people who are LGBTQ plus. And what that means is when they come in the door, they don't have to come out to her because she already knows. And that takes that kind of level of stress away from them about having to say, to say the right thing or something like that. But it also means that she understands their intrinsic values, what they're interested in, and what they're going through at the moment. Not everything, but most things that they're going through. So I would always just say, start with your audience first, rather than, starting with thinking that you have to post online first. Start with your audience first, figure out what their big worries are and what their questions are, and then work around that. And you mentioned something about like who to engage with.
Yes.
Social media is like the coldest place ever because everyone is on there. So we have this thing in marketing of cold and hot. So like cold is, for instance, where someone's got no interaction with your brand previously. They don't really know who you are, and they've got no reason to listen to you or trust you or follow you or anything like that. Social media is full of that. How many times a day do you come across people that you've never met before or you've never even heard from? And it takes something really special to turn you from really, really cold to something that's going to be warm. And that thing is value. So unless you say something really interesting to those people, they're just going to scroll past because their brain is telling them, this isn't useful. We need to carry on our day. We need to just think about the next meal and we need to carry on going. Like that's our primitive instinct, is to just ignore something unless it's going to add to our survival. So unless you're stopping people in their tracks and saying, you need to know this, they've got no reason to engage or interact with you. So you need to say something different. You need to say something interesting and something valuable to them. And I would just say to people, give your best stuff away for free. Like, why are we so scared to give our best knowledge and our best insights away for free? Because Google exists and we shouldn't be trying to compete with Google because we're not going to be able to. So people can find out whatever they want to nowadays. But what they want from you is your perspective on that and how you can help them get from where they are now to where they want to be. So just give all your best stuff away for free. That's what I would say.
I like that because a lot of people are afraid of that, aren't they? And they perhaps give little teasers as a way of what you might be able to get if you continue to follow somebody. The idea of giving away some of the best stuff for free. I mean, what do you think's the output for that? What's the benefit to you of giving that stuff away for free?
It's value. That's what I was saying. So it depends the payoffs that you're willing to make. So if you're willing to give away some of your stuff that already exists out there, but your clients might not have heard it yet, because your clients might not have heard it yet, that immediately increases your influence with them. So they can find it anywhere they want to. But if they hear it from you first, that is massive, and you're going to leave a massive influence on them. So that's the ultimate payoff. You just by giving your best stuff away for free, you've gained a new, person of influence who's following you now. So that's why we're never scared to give our best stuff away for free, because that growing your influence, you literally cannot replace that. It's enormous. So I'd probably say that's the payoff.
Yeah, it's almost I'm seeing sort of connections here between growing this idea of a brand, it having values behind it, which are essentially associated with the people behind the brand. That have to be authentic values. And then that in turn develops a trust in the right type of audience who share your values. And it becomes, as you say, this community who are reasonably loyal to that service provider. And obviously it's a completely free market. People can go wherever they like. They don't owe you anything for giving away that stuff for free, but there's something quite human about having somebody you trust and staying with that because you know that the material has that integrity, has the same values as you. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and you're completely right about the community thing. Communities are becoming, I mean, obviously I'm going to say this because of Next Gen, but communities are becoming just more and more popular, and more that they're resonating with people more and more because there's more people on our planet now. The kind of smaller communities inside of us are becoming much, much stronger. So, local communities are on the rise again. People like financial planning community, like for instance, with our financial planning community, it's becoming more popular again because people are looking for that. Because there's so many people out there, they're looking for that person-to-person interaction that they don't get from wider society. So, brand is community. That's the way it works.
Yeah. So if we're talking about putting some content out then that's giving some of your best stuff away for free, that's interesting, relevant to people, what makes good content? Because you can do videos, you can do text, audio, images. Different channels use different mediums quite freely. So Instagram's very video based, isn't it? Obviously TikTok's quite video based as well. LinkedIn tends to be a bit more text based, but there's also videos in there. What sort of content should somebody be thinking about making? What would be the best sort of stuff? Because this stuff takes time, doesn't it? So where's the best place to invest your time if you want to start putting content out? Should it be video straight off, or is text okay? Is text dead? What should we be doing?
Oh God, again, I could talk for hours on this question. So I think it really depends on what you want to get from social media as well, and how much time you have to put into it. Like, you're right, videos and stuff do take a little bit more time. So I probably wouldn't start with them unless you're feeling really confident. I mean, again, though, we're going to talk about this later when you ask about how much time it takes. Last week I recorded a reel on our Instagram. It took me 10 minutes to make, and the response to it was amazing. We put it on TikTok and everything, and really did get a lot of views and stuff. And that takes 10 minutes to make. Now, I'm not saying it's going to take you guys 10 minutes to make, because it'll probably be the first time that you've ever made one, so you'll be struggling with it and things like that. So it might take a little bit longer. But again, that's so much more accessible nowadays. When we used to think about creating videos, we used to think about like high produced, in studios and stuff like that. Whereas nowadays you can create pretty professional stuff on your iPhone.
Yeah, so just going to stop you for a minute then, Dan. What's a reel for somebody who doesn't know what a reel
sorry.
is?
Yeah.
Obviously, because some people might be just starting out thinking, what on earth is a reel, and what is that? Might have seen one, but what is one? What is one of these things?
So they're short videos, basically. So they're Instagram's attempt at staying relevant when TikTok came out. So Instagram tried to become TikTok, basically, and they created reels on it. They've gone down pretty well, like they're pretty popular. TikTok's more popular, obviously. But yeah, they're basically just Instagram's answer to TikTok.
Right. So it's a short way of creating quite an informal video. Yeah.
And that beautifully brings me on to the point I was trying to make with the question, is the shortness of stuff. So as I mentioned earlier, we're constantly bombarded with stuff, like content, people, communication, emails, all day. We're just blasted with everything, and your brain is just in overdrive all the time. It is literally just like trying to wade through all of that stuff and think, that's not important, chuck that out, let's move on to the important stuff. Occasionally it gets distracted by funny things, like on TikTok and stuff, for instance, and occasionally it will come across something and say, hang on a second, stop in your tracks, because that's important. And the whole point of creating content is to do that, is to stop other people's brains in their tracks and say, you need to know this. So I'll see a lot of people who will, on LinkedIn, they'll just put a link to a blog, and then they'll wonder why they don't get any reads or any like views or anything like that on the back. It's because blogs are somewhere else. So LinkedIn will penalize you for not using organic content on LinkedIn. So what I'm trying to get across here is create organic content. So don't just borrow other people's stuff. I see a lot of people reposting content from other people. That's absolutely fine, but it shouldn't just be the only thing that you post as well. So come up with your own stuff. It's not hard nowadays. You can come up with your own stuff. It might take a little bit of time, but it's definitely worth it. Again, the point before about not just posting advertisements, that's absolutely crucial. Make sure that you're offering your audience some value in something. And I think the most crucial thing is, don't just create stuff because you've been told to, or because you feel like you need to. If you do that, then that will make you hate social media. If you see yourself, if social media for you is eating the frog, then you'll never love it, because like it becomes a chore. So post stuff when you're feeling creative, or create stuff when you're feeling creative. Whenever any good idea pops into your head, write it down, or come up with in a video or something like that. Don't try and force yourself to do it, because again, you'll just fall out of love with it really, really simply. And when you asked a question about short posts, yes, short posts, we always like to limit our stuff to less than 250 words. Simply because we're just so busy nowadays. We're being bombarded with so much stuff that it takes something really special for someone to stop in their tracks and read something longer from you. So meet them where they're at. Post something really, really short, really insightful. It doesn't have to be massively life-changing. It can just be one small tip on how they can get better. that is, you know, that's going to make them stop in their tracks immediately.
Yeah, so short, digestible content. This is a lot like learning materials, isn't it? It's got to be short, it's got to be bite-sized, it's got to be something you can dip in and dip out of at a time that suits you. So I'm liking this idea of videos now being more accessible as well, because we all think about putting videos out as a piece of content. And then again, I come from that old school view of you've got to have the right lighting, you've got to have the right setup, you've got to have the right camera, you've got to have the scripts, you've got to then edit it all later on. But you see more and more raw videos on LinkedIn and TikTok now that are literally just face to camera, 10 minutes, somebody sharing an insight. Is that okay in a professional arena? Is
yes.
that, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And so if we still think of financial planning as this kind of old boys club of people in suits and overly professional and uber kind of, you know, boring, then we're never ever going to bring financial planning into the 21st century. So if we want to bring ourselves into the 21st century, we have to do this. It's not that we can do this, it's that we have to do this we have to get more creative with the way that we talk to our audiences.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the compliance thing is really interesting, because I have spoken to people recently who've said, I really wanted to post this online, but my compliance team stopped it because they didn't want it to be seen as constituting advice, for example. And that's a fine line to walk, isn't it? So it's sharing content that is relevant to your audience, but you're not actually giving advice in that arena. So it's definitely something to be thinking about, but not to let it stop you posting.
No, absolutely. And again, though, this comes down to the thing. Again, I'm sorry to annoy people, but it's generally because the compliance team just doesn't understand the rules, or it just doesn't understand social media. There are certain like lines that you have to draw between advice and guidance and that kind of stuff. But usually, like I said, it's because so there are a lot of great compliance consultants out there who understand the rules, you know, like the back of their hand, and they'll be able to say, yep, that's fine, or no, that's not, because there's a clear line between them. So yeah, listen to the right people on that area as well. Don't get put off by horror stories or anything like that. Usually what you're posting is absolutely fine.
Okay. I'm just mindful of time, because I know we're coming to the sort of final 10 minutes of the session. So I just want to remind the people who are still in the room, if you have got any questions, please do drop them in the chat, and we'll come back to those at the end. I just want to give some people now some strategies to take away, if you like, or some examples of good practice. So a bit of both, if we can, in the last bit of time we've got available now. So first of all, can you pick out any social media accounts that financial planners should be following to see some examples of good practice? Who's doing it well at the moment?
This is an easy one, this one. So there's a fantastic guy in the United States. We recently just had him on our podcast. He's called Thomas Kopelman. So that's Thomas, spelled with a H. And then his surname is Kopelman. And he runs a financial planning firm called All Street Wealth in, I think it might be the Midwest. He'll probably tell me off. I can't remember exactly where it is. He gets 90% of his clients from social media. And the way he does that is just by doing all of the stuff we've been talking about here. So he gives value, he engages with his audience, he puts videos and stuff up there, and he's just fun and interesting. So when people have a question about this kind of stuff, or they need any help with this, because they've been following him and because they're influenced by him, there's no one else they're going to go to. They'll go to him immediately. But also what's great about him is he understands his target audience. So he only works with millennials and wealth builders. And as a result, he puts his content out there specifically designed for those people. So it goes down very well with them. He's not trying to be all things to all people. He knows who he's talking to. He knows what they're looking for, and they love it. Someone else, because I know I'm wary of the time as well, is Make My Money Matter here in the UK. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that. They're great. And they're not financial planning, but they're just a fantastic LinkedIn account to follow, so, and Instagram as well, so make sure to give them a follow. And then there's also, I don't know if anyone in the audience has heard of Katie Braden, from the US. On the video side, she creates some fantastic stuff about how you can use videos and framing and things like that as well. So definitely those three. And I'm going to steal one more as well, if you don't mind. This has got nothing to do with marketing or social media or anything, but there's a great organization in the US called Choir. I think they call themselves Choir, so CHOIR, and what they're trying to do is make financial planning events and conferences more diverse. So We can probably imagine what a financial planning conference looks like. If you think about it in your head, you can imagine what that looks like. They're basically like sick of that. They're sick of going to those events. So they've come up with a framework for how to make financial planning conferences more diverse. So they're doing some great work in the United States as well. So 4 for the price of 1.
Yeah. Amazing. They sound great. And we'll grab the links from you if that's okay, so I can share them with as part of the podcast, that people can follow those. It's always good to have, we say, not to copy, not to wish to want to be, but to see good practice, who is doing it well, and what does good look like, and then how am I going to put my brand out there. There's loads of good work going on out there. Okay, so just to wrap up then, what would you say your top tips are for creating your first piece of engaging content?
This is the biggest, this is the one that people have been waiting for, isn't it? So it kind of touches on everything that we've been talking about today. So make it organic. So don't just take someone else's content and copy it, or repost it or something like that. You've got plenty of thoughts and opinions in your head about the way that things should be, or what's going to be helpful for your audience. So just write about it, or record it, or create some content around it. Make it short, and crucially, something we haven't talked about today is simple. If you're going to try and answer too many difficult questions, off the bat, it's never going to go down very well. So put stuff into plain English, get rid of all the jargon, just make it very, very simple and short, less than 250 words. Or if you're creating a video, less than 2 minutes, something digestible, short, easy for people to consume. Talk about what your audience actually wants to know. So you might want to talk about products and investments and pensions and all that kind of stuff, because that's what you've been taught in your exams. Your audience doesn't care less about that kind of stuff. It's the stuff that they come to you for, because they might have got a letter from their pension provider or something saying you need to take action with this. But that's not the stuff they really worry about. What people really worry about is, am I going to be okay? So talk about stuff that helps them realize that they are going to be okay, or helps them along that journey. Don't talk about pensions and investments or relevant life insurance policies or anything like that, because it's just not interesting for them. They don't know what it means, and there's no reason why they should. That's why they have you there. And kind of on that as well, remember to write for your target audience. So know who your target audience is and write for them. I see a lot of people talking to their audience as if they're financial planners or as if they're colleagues. You're not going to get any clients from your colleagues or from other financial planners. You pick up a few referrals or something like that. But what you're trying to do on social media is talk to your audience, not to people who do the same job as you, not to people who you're competing with. So write for your target audience, not for anyone else. I'm reading off a list by here. That's why I'm looking at that.
It's a fantastic list, isn't it? Yeah.
There's just 2 final ones. Ask people for their opinions. So comments and engagement is something that is like the gold dust of social media. So ask people what they think about something. We always forget to ask people what their opinions or what their thoughts are on something. So a great way to do this is like polls. I know that they have a bad name, but polls, questions, that kind of stuff, anything to get the conversation going. Absolutely, that kind of stuff is gold dust. And the final one is, don't be scared to go against the grain. So I'm a northerner. I'm never scared to tell people what I think, which sometimes can get me into some pretty bad situations. But genuinely, if you want to become a thought leader and if you want to stand out, you need to say stuff that other people haven't said, or you need to say stuff that goes against what the common kind of acceptance is. Because otherwise, why would anyone listen to you? Because you're just saying the same things as anyone else. So don't be scared to say something completely different to what is currently accepted.
Amazing, Dan. And in the spirit of giving away your best stuff for free, you really did just give our listeners some amazing tips there, some amazing advice and strategy. So really, really grateful for those. We are coming to the end of our session now. I can't see any questions in the chat at the moment, but if anybody has a question that they'd like to ask, please feel free to bob that in there as we're finishing off here. Dan, if anybody wants to get in touch with yourself or NextGen for anything that off the back of this session, what would be the most appropriate way for them to contact you in the vast array of social media? Which one's your preference?
Well, as we're talking about social media, we should probably tell people to go to social media, shouldn't we? So NextGen is obviously on all social media channels, so you just need to search NextGen Planners. I'm on LinkedIn. So you can find me on there, and on there is my Calendly link, so you can book a call for 20 minutes. I'm not precious about giving people 20 minutes of my time. So if anyone wants to have a chat about this kind of stuff, I'm more than welcome for you to book some time in and to just ask some questions. Like I said, we're not precious about giving this stuff away for free. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to point you in the right direction. So you can find my calendar link on there. And then of course, Next Gen Planners is available everywhere as well.
Fab, that's incredibly generous, Dan. Thank you. So that is the end of our session now. There were loads more questions I could have asked, and I'm sure there's lots more ideas for future podcasts that we could put together, or examples of little videos we might be able to do down online. I can see loads of follow-ups from this session that I'd be excited to do. Got some thank yous in the chat for you as well there. So thank you for your time. Thank you to everybody that's listened. I hope you've taken something away from the session. As I said at the start, love it or hate it, social media is here to stay. It's a big part of lots of people's lives. And once you get sucked in, you do kind of get sucked in. It's quite a funny one, isn't it? Once you get in the groove and get your confidence up, you're away, and it goes from there. So hopefully we've encouraged some people to have a go and share.